as you know, tomorrow is a big day. We are going to do our contribution period. It starts at 3 p.m. here in Berlin. And we're really excited about this because this is something that is a culmination of 18 months of hard work. And it sets us up to launch the network. And you've seen some of the examples from earlier today. A couple of points about Ocean Protocol before I go into tokenomics. First thing is, we think that the killer feature that really underlines the entire protocol is that it's about decentralized orchestration. It's about giving developers control over their marketplaces, over their tools, over their data science pipelines. It gives them control. And that is something that what we've seen more and more in today's Web 2 world is that the platforms control everything. And when they decide that you shouldn't be on the platform, they can take you off. And this is something that goes across all the Web3 philosophy, and that's kind of a sacrosanct value proposition for what we're building, and that is to spread the benefits of AI and data around the world, and as well to rebalance the power away from these centralized nodes that are currently existing in Web 2. And Chris Perniska had a couple tweets over the weekend that encapsulated this, so I put them in here. Crypto isn't seeing mainstream user traction, it's seeing mainstream developer traction because developers are the precursors to users. Why? Most mainstream devs have already been burnt by building on centralized platforms that cut access for competitive reasons. And while some users have experienced some loss of access, they tend to be users who operate more on a societal fringe and not the mainstream. So who are the people that we want working on Ocean Protocol and joining the movement to start with? It's the developers and the data scientists, the people who want to own and control their data science pipelines and their marketplaces, and to start monetizing and creating value where they know that they can trust in the service execution agreements and they can trust in what's happening in the network. And the question is, why data? Hernando de Soto, many of you probably read this book, wrote a really cool book, I think it was in 1998, about the mystery of capital. And he defined dead capital as a term for any asset that cannot be easily bought, sold, valued, or used as an investment. Does that remind you of something currently in today's world? Yeah, it's data. How much dead capital is lying around in data silos, unused, getting stale, not valued properly, while the problems that face our planet are waiting. We have thousands and millions of data scientists, students around the world who are studying this technology, and they are not able to solve problems for lack of data. But this data is valuable. Everybody wants to share it. But what stops that from happening? Well, it turns out there was also an article a couple weeks ago, or yeah, I think it was 1 week ago. It was called Markets Are Eating the World. And Taylor Pearson wrote about 3 things that stop markets from happening. There's triangulation. It's finding what you're trying to buy. There is the transfer, the negotiation, the deal, and all that sort of stuff. And finally, the trust. So if something goes wrong, is there recourse? Do I trust this person? Do I trust the quality? And in markets where these factors are high, you don't have a lot of transactions. Or when you do have transactions, it's that the transactions are large enough so that it makes it worth your effort to invest that time and energy to solve the 3 T's. In markets where you reduce this, the triangulation costs, the transfer costs, the trust costs, you find that people are able to transact more, and you get this long tail effect of markets opening up that were not possible before. A couple of examples, obvious, Uber, Airbnb. You would never have gotten into a stranger's car in the past 10 years ago. You would never have went to a stranger's home 10 years ago. Now it's possible because the 3 T's are reduced. Can we do this for data? So that's kind of the starting point of why, the framing of why blockchain, why data, why decentralized. The rest of this goes towards our offering because this presentation is being videotaped. We just throw in an announcement and disclaimer that this announcement is about offering of securities exclusively to international investors under Reg S, exemption and accredited investors in reliance of a Rule 506C Reg D of the U.S. Securities Act. So, ocean tokenomics. Just as a general, we call it ocean token. We originally had OCN, but it got taken by a company called Odyssey. We will take the moniker ocean, kind of fitting. We're going in at 22 cents. There's a couple of questions about this and why and such like that, but it was a number that we felt respected earlier contributors and was a fair price for new contributors. There are multiple arguments for price points much, much lower because of the overall crypto market, but there are also arguments for the price being even higher. We're one of the few, maybe one out of 20 types of projects that have delivered code and working product compared to many of the other projects in the past. So this was something that we talked with about a couple hundred people, and we came to something that was right around there. And so we think that this is a fair offering to the community. We started out with a total token supply of 1.41 billion ocean tokens. And there's a little bit of story behind that, because in the world there's 1.38 billion cubic kilometers of water on Earth. But if you take the mass of that, it turns out to be 1.41 cubic gajillion kilograms. And that's kind of the inspiration of where we got that number from. And we're going to start with an initial circulating supply of 192 million. The most important thing here is just that what the circulating supply is, that has a lot of impact in terms potentially on the token price and how people kind of view the token and such like that. What we've committed to is to work with the Messari Registry. It's a startup in New York that is focused on transparency of projects. So we're going to be, whenever there's material changes, we will report them over to Messari, probably on a quarterly basis. If any of the founding team liquidates, if the foundation has grants, airdrops, bounties, and prizes, we will probably give like a quarterly report and be as transparent as possible to the community. So that's one of our kind of commitments. And then we're aiming for a network launch on March 31st. We just had a tweet today, and then the tokens will be ready in your wallets 15 days after launch. It will start out as an ERC20 token, and then it will be ported and migrated over into the POA Ocean network. I also wanted to highlight what we did with the allocation. So we started out with 45% of the tokens going into the block reward or the network reward. And what we realized is that we should increase that. Why? Because for a couple of reasons. Number one is we think that a network reward is a very good alignment incentive function. It brings people together around the network so that people can earn tokens by providing services, by providing keeper services, by bringing data. And by increasing that reward function, which is probably one of the most generous ones in the entire space, you're going to have the coordination function decentralized, and people are going to look for ways to earn Ocean token from the network function, and we think that that's healthy. The second reason why we thought that was healthy was because the sooner that the foundation can go into a community development role where it encourages community, it doesn't pick winners, it just tries to support in terms of technical roadmap, in terms of spreading the benefits, getting a lot of developers on board, running events and such like that. In order for that to happen, what we should do is make it so that the foundation's mandate is about distributing the tokens that it has and is solely used for that. And then what we do is we push decentralization onto different layers. So for instance, the node operators will have their kind of role in the decentralization function. The marketplaces will do whatever they want. You're going to also have curators and such on top of that who do their own thing. And by pushing as much into the block reward function, at the same time, what you're doing is you're essentially saying to the foundation, take a role of nurturing the network and not being a centralizing function, because we don't want to be like another Web 2 organization where the foundation just self-perpetuates because it's becoming powerful and it starts liking that feeling. So that's the main reason why we did a reallocation of tokens between March last year and now. The circulating supply of tokens, you'll notice it goes out to 2070 because we're trying to think long term here, but it's a log curve. We have most of the tokens coming out within 4 years, 4 or 5 years. And there's two kind of thoughts on this. Inflation is something that, of course, affects the token supply. But at the same time, if what we're having is explosive usage on the network, explosive growth, this is kind of how we allow for early adopters to have some of the upside later on if the network and the ecosystem forms around it. Later on, of course, there's a lot less, the curve kind of flattens out, and that's where you have people who earn ocean tokens directly from marketplaces, from data sales, from services and such like that. Right now, for instance, on the vesting on the founding teams in the initial phase, it's 60 months. The seed round was 30 months. Pre-launch is 18 months, and anybody who contributes now has get their tokens unlocked immediately. But that's a curve that is programmatically set, particularly after all the vesting periods are done, and that's essentially the block reward. Another way to look at this is the inflation over time. So, of course, as I said, in the first 4 years, the inflation of the total token supply starts at, let's say, 192 million tokens on day one. 1 year later, it'll be somewhere in the range of 400 million tokens. And then for the next 3 years, it'll be about 20% inflation. And then afterwards, it takes then the log curve where that is the block reward. So it's programmatic. It hopefully hews towards kind of the principles that, in the first 4 years, there's going to be a lot of movement. We're going to be upgrading the protocol. We'll find bugs. We'll be fixing them and such like that. But there'll also be an explosion of work and marketplaces and data sciences coming on. Scientists coming on, and then afterwards, of course, you have what's happening, for instance, in the Bitcoin space, where there's an equilibrium of the node keepers. You have people who kind of know what the incentive functions are, and then people actually start just working towards that. You actually can't see that, I guess. It doesn't show up in this from the Beamer, but what we've done here is we showed kind of pre-mine and network reward. And if you look at the network reward, it kind of starts here, if you can see, and a little bit in purple, and then this is the supposedly pink or fuchsia. What it shows is that in the initial phase, of course, you have a lot of pre-mined tokens. So anybody who is an early adopter now, I mean, that is a big portion. But as this kind of dissipates and spreads, so that you have a different Gini coefficient, right, where anybody who gets tokens now releases them on exchanges, buys and sells products and services on the network, that dissipates to a broader and broader community, which is also one of the, I guess, goals of the foundation, to make sure that the tokens are broadly spread over time. And then here, what you see is the network reward, where we have a warm-up phase. What we know is that we've run token engineering meetups around the globe, about 20 of them, 1,000-strong community. We've learned a lot about incentive design and stuff, and what the main thing that we've learned is that we don't release these into the wild on a first cut and think that it'll be able to withstand adversarial conditions. And so what we're doing is we're building in different functionality, staking, incentive models, and seeing how it runs. And then as we proceed, then we ratchet up the block reward. So by about January, I think it's November 2021, around that range, subject to change and meeting our technical milestones, we'll have a full network reward coming out around 4.7 million, and then it goes downwards for another 50 or 60 years at least, in a reasonable amount. And then over time, of course, that way exceeds by, it's 2/3 of the full token supply compared to what was happening in the pre-mine. One thing that I do want to address head on is that because our circulating supply is about 191.7 million, that would put us in at a 48 million valuation. Now, a lot of people look at the valuation in Y2050 as if the tokens were out there, or fully diluted. And so these are the other numbers. But what I did want to say is that most people are looking at circulating supply, and 48 million puts us in at, I think, number 71, with projects like Walton Chain and a couple other ones that are, you know, also working forward, I guess. And it's out there, and happy to answer any questions about that. Where does the value accrue in the Ocean token? It starts over time. As you saw with the warm-up phase, with the incentives and stuff like that, over time, what happens is the utility is imbued into the network. The level of decentralization gets imbued into the network. And you know, it starts out as a means of exchange, pure and simple, and then it goes into various things. So the network reward comes out. So that's a utility component. Then there's the ability to escrow and stake tokens on valuable services and data. You can also use Ocean tokens to start betting on data. Imagine a data stream that has so much liquidity on it and so many stakes on it and bets that it actually reaches escape velocity and becomes kind of an IPO of a data set. That's something that hasn't really been talked about, but there's a lot of ideas that we've realized are possible now. And when you look at, for instance, what's happening in the Ethereum kind of decentralized finance world and stuff, the whole ICO thing, we see a parallel in the data market. Because what we're doing is we're reducing the 3 Ts, you're going to have this long tail of data that was never, ever possible to be bought and sold. These services that were never, ever possible to be bought and sold globally, now being possible. So that's one huge kind of wave of innovation. The second wave of innovation is, what happens if you could ICO a data stream? That's kind of cool, right? And so imagine what's happening in the Ethereum world, and we are coming a couple of years behind that because we're building a data economy that will allow data streams to be ICO'd. And then after that, of course, you have decentralized finance. So what happens if you can use data as like a stable coin? What happens if you securitize that and turn it into a stable coin? What happens if you can turn Ocean into a stable coin itself that's wrapped in some form? There's multiple kind of parallels, and we're seeing this already in Ethereum, where you can do what Hernando de Soto said about property, digital data. You can start turning it into the characteristics of land that we currently have, and all the tools that are now going to be available for data through Ocean is something really exciting, and I hope that some of you are playing a role in that to build tools and make this stuff happen, because this is probably the most exciting part about what we're trying to build, is because everybody has data, and data is spread all around the world. It's like talent, right? It's equally distributed around the world, but the opportunity necessarily isn't. And Ocean is a way for the data aspect to be spread to all people. Yeah. And just, I know that, you know, the crypto market has had a difficult year, very difficult year. But to give everybody perspective, one of my team members put this together, and it showed that a project that reaches 2 years old typically doesn't perform that bad compared to other asset classes. So this is just a reminder that even though the last year has been quite difficult, all in all, the crypto scene is truly going to change the world, not just because there's a mass of value flowing into this, a mass of developer attention, and a mass of people who, I guess, for lack of a better term, speculate on this stuff. The projects over time that survive perform very, very well if you're looking at it from a financial perspective. And just to close off, I wanted to just say, you know, we have a roadmap that takes us a couple of years out. The current raise is meant to help finance that. Also, potentially releasing the token, getting feedback from the community is something very important to us, because we've always taken the kind of move fast and release product when you're a little bit embarrassed of it, hopefully not a lot. We've tried to put a lot of work into the look and the feel and the user experience of all the materials we do, from the code to the videos to all the materials you see online. The team takes a lot of pride in providing good work. And so this is the roadmap. We start with a V2 that comes after our kind of our V1 alpha, beta, and production. But you know what we're going to do is put in improved service execution agreements, specific marketplaces for industry verticals, and then a certain amount of slashing staking conditions, bounty rewards. Then we move over to other types of incentives, verification, validation conditions, cryptographic proofs, some more integration into Web3. And then here's where we start getting more decentralized, where we have kind of on-chain bounties, where, for instance, you as community members can start identifying which projects should get funding from the foundation and such like that. We're really excited for that day where we can kind of push more power and voice to the community. We also have this thing called tribes, where we call it now clans, but where people gather around problems that they want to solve, and then you can put bounties, you can stake on this, and then if that problem is solved, then that prize can get unlocked. This is very good. And then finally, a fully permissionless Ocean protocol where you then have decentralization on multiple levels, governance on the tech side, on how the foundation is run, how bounties are distributed, all these types of things that we feel deeply committed to. So with that, thank you very much. We can open it up to some questions that you might have. Yes. Right here, please.
I hope I'll be coherent with my comment, and because this is a bit, let's go a little bit to the foundation. I don't know if you took Hernando de Soto as the best example for Ocean Protocol. His input on the microfinance has been proved false by the economic realities, not only in India, Africa, and Asia, but basically with no exception where it was implemented. So besides of fueling the neoliberal dream, pipe dream, Hernando de Soto actually caused a lot of problems. If you are building Ocean Protocol on de Soto's political economy, you might be in trouble. Shall I tell you why and how?
Sure.
Simply because people are not the microcredits will not vindicate lack of access to current water, to sanitation, to food. There are so many problems. This is why I said in the beginning, I hope that I'm coherent, that I would need like really time to systematize my critique. But now I see, when I really realize that you build Ocean Protocol on microcredit, on mirroring microcredit assumptions, I'm like, wow.
So let me address that. So, Hernando de Soto, like, nobody is always right on everything. He had multiple ideas. Number one was he sent people around to Egypt, to Peru, and multiple places to say how long does it take and how many, permits do I need to get something set up? And so, for instance, in Egypt or something, it was like 9 years to set up to buy land. And in Peru, it was like 5 years to set up a business. So that was one aspect. He also had another thing, which was just a general concept, which is much of an economy is dead because it's not properly titled. You have government systems that make it very difficult for that stuff to happen. And then, of course, he had also this foray into microcredits, which is separate. But so the main idea here is not that we're building based on Hernando de Soto. It's a framing for people to understand. It's just a framework. And the highest level idea is that if you can reduce the 3 T's, you open up new markets. So there's markets in the future that are not possible today, whatever they might be. You can imagine when it comes to different types of maybe selling genetic data, or different types of markets for I don't know, like AI bots in a VR world, this type of thing. There's multiple markets that are in the future that are not possible for a couple of reasons. Number one is technology is not mature. Number two is the transfer, triangulation, and trust costs are not yet low enough to make a market form. On the other side, we have markets that are very well developed. Your local Sunday market, where you go there. Everybody knows, everybody uses euros. You go there to buy your olives and stuff like that. These are markets that were formed hundreds of years ago in Byzantine bazaars or in Middle Ages here in Europe or what have you. And what we're doing is we're going down a continuum where different types of services and products can start being unlocked, where before you weren't able to. And so that's like a paradigm of thinking. And when you use something like land, for instance, that is just one framing. But you have other framings where if you think about Ocean Protocol of unlocking data in a marketplace situation, there is no market for data. I mean, I bought data once that was diamond data. It cost me $10,000, cost two months to do a negotiation on why I'm using this diamond data. Our team was doing some research, and it took us a while to convince the company who had that data to sell it to us. Now, in an ocean world, could they sell it to us, program in their into the service execution agreements the conditions on how they would sell that data and why they would sell that data and who they would sell that data, and me, if I fit that model and I accept their terms, I could buy that data without spending 2 months to argue about conditions of use. And this is what we're trying to do. Now, what that also means is that data starts being valued and there's a price point for data. Could that not be used analogously as saying that that data was a piece of property that was getting stale and unused, and now it actually has some value now in the present that it wouldn't have had before? That's the extent of the example. So I take your example. I understand that there were certain things that Hernando de Soto did not necessarily, like his beliefs were definitely neoliberal and stuff like that, but there's a core aspect of that can you unlock something that currently is dead and not being used and make it available to people where, for instance, if you're a company, an IT center becomes a profit center. If you're a human, you can actually say, I control my genetic data, I control my private data, and yeah, I might want to sell it for $5, but generally, in this crowd, I probably wouldn't want to, right? All of it, you would say it. But for you to have that control over your property, I think that changes the model. So thank you for your insight. Anybody else? Here.
So, is this working? Hello? You said you'll be very transparent, and there is a vesting period for the founding team, about 5 years. Will there be some sort of directors' dealings at Messages at some point where you basically start selling your own token?
So,
like in a publicly listed company, they're very transparent and they actually have to...
Yeah, we have nothing against that. So it's what it would be probably is it may not be individuals, but on a company level, for sure. So just to let you be completely transparent. So for instance, for BigChainDB, half of the tokens are going to shareholders who essentially funded us for 4 years until we got to this point.
And this is part of the founding team allocation?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes, for BigChainDB. Of those early backers for our long-term VCs, and they themselves have 100 LPs behind them, limited partners, investors, pension funds, endowments, high net worth individuals, companies, even companies like, so for instance, once we release the token, we give them to some of our investors. Companies like MasterCard, First Data, Stanford University, the Texas Teachers Fund, all these companies and organizations will have Ocean tokens, whether they know it or not. So, and that'll come through the part of the founder tokens. Now, the VCs themselves, I've already spoken to most of them. They've all said, we're going to hang on to this for as long as our fund is, because, I mean, they're not speculators. They invested in BigChainDB for this reason. We've also put 25% towards employees because they're the ones who built the network. so they deserve it. And then we have 25% in reserve for BigChainDB. Now, and that goes towards operating expenses, what have you. And so when we release these tokens, we'll definitely report that to the community. Yeah, and on the Newton Circus DEX side, they have a similar commitment to have a similar type of transparency and reporting.
Cool. Yeah, that was basically my second question. If basically the allocation of the founding tokens are transparent, but you somehow summarized that already. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just as a side note, I did a calculation that of all the limited partners and everything, there's probably going to be several million people who own like 20 cents of Ocean token or 50 cents of Ocean token around the world kind of thing because of through this distribution from the BigChainDB side. So more people who, they just won't know that they have Ocean token, but they will. It's kind of cool.
So can you just describe in a little more detail the life cycle of tokens and at what point, if you want to participate in either buying or selling of data, you need to acquire them, how you hold it. Somebody prior had the example of maybe the farmer, and I'm just thinking of for some of these use cases, just like how people actually get them, when they need them, how they use them.
Yeah, this is a UX problem, right? So in blockchain world, there's two problems that we have, major problems. One's scalability, and the other one is UX. Scalability, we're putting a lot of work into. UX, less. How do you make it so that people understand that they control their keys and they take that seriously when nowadays we still have 1, 2, 3, 4 as passwords kind of thing? While making it easy and not giving power back to another platform, right? That's the challenge. How do we make it so that somebody, a farmer, who may not be like up to speed on crypto and may not follow ICO drops, is able to use a cryptocurrency or a currency that's based on crypto for what they need? I don't have a great answer for that. What we do know is that we're investing a lot of time and energy. If you looked at some of the stuff that Marcus presented earlier today, some of the stuff that Jerry presented, you know, we're going to constantly work at improving the user experience. But a lot of this happens, this innovation on the UX side is going to happen on the marketplace level because as we kind of said, we don't know how like a high frequency trading data marketplace is going to look like. We don't know how a genetic data marketplace is going to look like and that type of UX or agricultural weather data. We don't really know how that's all going to happen. What we do know is that if we provide the proper components, modules, and building blocks, somebody else is going to be much closer to that problem and they're going to be able to develop a first marketplace. It'll be rough, and then you'll have more marketplaces, and over time you do get at least a passable user experience and onboarding. That's kind of the best I can answer at this stage.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you talk a little bit about the team that is actually working on this? I mean, we've seen the roadmap, but you know, just give us a perspective of how big the team is. Is they all here? They're contributors throughout the world, and they're open source contributors, et cetera, et cetera. So just give us a feeling about how does that look like?
So I'm personally very proud of our team around the globe. We have a big contingent of developers here in Berlin. We have a team in Singapore, in Madrid, San Francisco, London. We have a team in India as well. And, you know, just about the profile of the team, where do we come from? I mean, we have a data scientist on board. We actually are looking to bring on more. We have experts in the AI field who spent decades working in that sector and successful exits and such like that. And then, of course, we have the blockchain side. So these are the three kind of components where AI, blockchain, and data meet. And then on top of that, we do have people who have done decades long of working with enterprises, either in a consulting role or in a consultative role to help enterprises deal with the technological change. And so we think that that's something that makes our team completely whole. And what we've recently learned, of course, in this space is the whole community marketing communications aspect. It's an interesting breed, the whole crypto space. And so we've bulked up on that. And now I think that we have one of the better teams in the world for dealing with community and such like that. But as always, I mean, we could be much, much better. And we want to learn from, of course, the community and whatever input we have. So from there, what we have is we have airdrops, we have bounties, we have ambassadors. We have, I think, at this stage, over 215 people who've registered to be an ambassador for Ocean. That's, I think, in 80 cities around the world, across 40 countries, people who kind of believe in this movement of Web3, unlocking your data. We have 30 advisors from around the world, mainly based in Europe and North America. And then what we're trying to do now is what we realize is that we haven't been spending enough time, for instance, in Asia. Those are markets that are very, very dynamic. They're getting crypto faster in some ways than the markets here in Europe and North America. And so we're going to spend some more time in Asia in the coming months and building a community there because you could argue that the heart of AI is in North America. Some of the deepest tech research is happening here in Europe, but a lot of the energy is also happening in Asia. And if we're going to be a global, inclusive project, we need to include that as well.
So, are you planning an initial exchange offering or not?
We don't do any exchange type of activities ourselves. If you're asking about whether or not there's any secondary exchanges that we've been working on, I can't really talk about that.
Sorry, another question. I don't want to take too much time, but could you give me the reason of the price? Because you didn't mention that of the price of the token 0.22.
So there's a couple of different kind of points. So we went in at the pre-launch at 20 cents. Mm-hmm. The market in the meantime fell about 80%, 85%. It's recovered a little bit. So there's an argument to be said that if we were to track the market, the token should be commensurate with that price, right? On the other hand, as one of the few teams that have actually delivered working code, how much do you then reinflate that? What's that worth? And then the best signal is this something that a new contributor would be willing to buy into? So you have the old contributors that you need to respect. You need to make sure that they're whole and that the long-term perspective is good for them. But for a new contributor, can you look them in the face and say, this is a fair deal? And so, we polled, as I said, 200 people. We had ranges between 8 cents to 70 cents, and we triangulated down, and back and forth along a pendulum until we came up with a range of 20 to 28 cents would be something that would be fair, and then we went with this price. Anybody else? Cool. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thank you for showing up tonight. Hope you enjoyed the pizza and the drinks. Welcome to the community. We welcome you.